Hello and welcome to the Isle of Wight Story Festival. It's our very great privilege to have an incredibly busy person with us for our next session. In a moment, I will introduce Rupa Farooqi. I just don't know how she manages to wear so many busy hats. Let me read you a little bit of some of the things that she's done and doing. Rupa Farooqi is an award-winning author of 6 novels for adults and has been listed for the Women's Prize for Fiction 3 times. She lectures in creative writing at the University of Oxford. She is the ambassador for the Family for the Relationship charity. And not only that, she's an NHS doctor and this can be all-consuming too, she is also a mother. Well, I mean, you can show your amazement by writing some suggestions and comments and questions in the chat, which we'd love you to do. We'd love to know what you think about the books that she's writing, about the things that she says. We'd love you to engage with us. But what we would ask is that if you do write something in the chat, maybe you could say whereabouts you are so that we know if you're watching on the Isle of Wight or if you're watching in Mid Wales or if you're watching in Halifax. But you don't need to give us your address or anything like that. No, we don't need to know that much information. And if you are watching and you're under the age of 12, we do ask that all children are accompanied by an adult for the sessions of the Isle of Wight Story Festival. And if you write something, do make sure it's nice. We don't want any unpleasant comments. And this will be recorded. So I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic session. And if you know some of your friends have missed it, then you can tell them they can watch it another time by searching on the IW Story Festival YouTube, because it will be there to see. But in a moment, I am going to hand over to this person. How can she manage to have so many hats? So welcome, Rupa Farooqi. How lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us on the Story Festival.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that wonderous introduction. I'm not sure how I'm going to live up to it. It's just such
I don't think it'll be a problem.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It is such a delight to be asked here to speak on your half-term holiday. Mine too. I've got a day off today, which is quite exciting. I don't always get weekends off. I had to work 3 weekends across January. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Dr. Rupa Farooqi. I have my glamorous clinician Teddy here wearing my badge to prove that. He's got my stethoscope as well. I'm a junior doctor. I've been working in the intensive care unit and in the acute medical wards, and most recently in the COVID wards for the last couple of years. And I'm also an author. So I've written, as Sue very kindly said, I've written 6 books for adults. They're sort of over here. I don't know if you can see them. I've also written books for children. So this is my latest one in my Double Detectives medical mystery series. And I'm also a teacher. I lecture in Oxford, which is where I also went to university. I'm also a mum. I've got 4 children. They don't like to be in the photos and so on. I've got a lovely cartoon of my twin daughters here because they really helped me when I was writing my books in terms of inspiring me. And I'm also a daughter and a sister. So we all wear lots of hats, don't we? Because I'm sure there are quite a few things that you can say that you do. You might say that, yes, you go to school, so you do that. You're also a daughter, a son, a brother or a sister, and that you also do lots of things. My daughters are artists, for example. So we all wear lots of hats. And the thing to do is to always do what we enjoy, because if you do what you enjoy, then nothing ever feels like a chore. So I'd like to tell you, oh, sorry, I've got some other things. I'm also a friend. I brought some photos of my friends to show you as well, because they've all really helped inspire me when I was writing as well. And there's a great shot here of me when I'm younger with my mum and my sisters, because I think siblings and family are really important when it comes to writing, because you think about who keeps you going and who inspires you. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my journey into being a writer, because I'd love to tell you a little bit about my books. So for me, there wasn't a particular time when I thought, yes, now I'm going to be a writer. That's what I'm going to do for a job. That'll be a really good way to earn a living. It wasn't anything like that. It's just that I always really liked stories. And I think most writers are good readers. first of all. So I really, really liked reading. It was what I did for fun. And I devoured my way through lots of books when I was little. My favorite one for a long time was The Lord of the Rings. I think it probably still is. Enormous trilogy. And I've got here my diary. So I've got my tea down there before it spills from the sofa. I've got my diary from when I was 7 years old. And in this, I actually wrote, it's one of those ones with a little lock. I actually wrote a book review of Lord of the Rings, talking about how amazing it was, saying, "Dear Diary, I have to tell you about this fantastic book. It makes everything come alive, and it makes everything feel that it's real and it's really happening right now. And it's really hard to do that in a book which has elves and dwarves and hobbits, but somehow it does it. And when I go to sleep at night, I'm thinking about these black riders, and I can hear them. I can hear them through the window." So I wrote that down in my diary just for me. Funnily enough, I showed this to my kids. I've got 4 children, a couple of weeks ago, and they just laughed and we went, "Oh, mummy, such a nerd. You're writing book reviews and it's not even for school." But that's what I just really wanted to do. I loved reading books. I loved writing about books. And then eventually I thought, oh, I actually quite like writing too. So my diary, actually, it started off being a bit of a picture book. So I didn't do very impressive pictures. Let me see if I can find you a couple. There we go. There's a bird in a tree. My daughter does much better birds than me. So it started off being something just for me to draw and scribble in. And then, sorry, I'm going to find, there we go, badges. Also drawing badges. And then I started just writing things about my day in it as well. And then I started writing about my family. I started writing when I was cross with my sister. I started writing some quite mean things that I might not have told my family or my parents, saying, "Oh gosh, mummy thinks she's so perfect." Well, she's not that perfect. I bet she didn't get perfect grades the whole time. All that sort of thing. So I kind of used it as a place to vent, as a sort of safe space. But then I started writing funny stories in it. And eventually I filled up this diary and then another one and another one. And sometimes when I was writing the stories, I thought I can actually make them a little bit more fun. So I started writing actual fictional stories, not just about me and my family, but about characters who I thought I might want to get to know a little bit more about. And after reading Lord of the Rings, I was really fascinated about this idea of creating a whole world for myself. So I created a world called, let me see if I can find something with my name on it. It's quite large. This is one of my books. And so I created a world called Apur Ekuraf, which is my name backwards. So it's a bit like my Narnia or my Middle Earth. And so I filled exercise books all about the characters who lived in this weird world. It was set on an island. It was called Apur Ekuraf. It had its own cultures, traditions, and history. And so it was so much fun to write that I thought I didn't really want to stop. So I just kept on writing stories. And when I was 15, I actually wrote my first full-length novel. And I remember even now that I sent it off to every publisher in town. I found out how to do that because I found out you could go to a local library and they had a book called the Writers and Artists Yearbook, and you could copy down the names of all the publishers. And so I literally, in my school computer room, printed out some copies of some chapters from my book, and I sent it out to all the publishers in town. And I remember saying in my letter, I said, "You might not want to publish me because I'm only 15, but I think it might be a marketing advantage." So that was my very first experience of trying to submit my books out into the world. Funnily enough, they didn't publish that book, but they were very nice to me. And I actually got some work experience. I got a chapter published for the Women's Press in one of their series for children. So that was when I started off writing. I think the first story that I was really proud of was one that I wrote for my school magazine, because I decided my school didn't really have a magazine. So we just sort of created one, just some photocopied bits of paper that we kind of spread around. And I wrote a story about a really mean tree that didn't want to be saved from deforestation and actually went around dropping branches and fruit on people, and then eventually learnt to be a bit nicer. So I called it Mean and Green. So that was my first sort of children's story that I wrote as a child. And eventually I just got more serious. Now, then what happened is that sort of life took over and I was doing other jobs for a bit. And then I started writing my adult fiction. And funnily enough, throughout all this time of being a writer and doing other jobs like being a lecturer and so on, I actually thought, you know what, when I was little, I really wanted to help people. I really wanted to be a doctor. But it was something that was quite hard for me to kind of imagine at the time. I guess because I didn't think I was very strong in sciences, so I didn't do those for my A-levels. But later on, when I had my own children, I thought, you know what, I always wanted to do that. So I've written, these are my adult books. I'd written 6 books by that point, and I thought, do I really want to write another adult book, or do I want to try and do something different? And I thought, I always wanted to be a doctor. Why don't we try and do that? So I home studied the sciences and I trained in medicine. And while I was training, I thought, I'm not going to write another book for grown-ups, because my children at that age were kind of all between the ages of 8 and 12. And they were getting quite cross that they couldn't see themselves or in my books or really read my books because they were for grown-ups. And I remember when this book came out, this one's called The Good Children, and it's got a picture of 4 children on the front. And my children said, is this about us, Mummy? Because it says The Good Children and there's a picture of us there. And I went, no, it's not about you. It's about good children. Ha ha. And they went, ha ha, Mummy. And they said, why can't we read it? And I said, I'm really sorry. It's got no pictures in it. It's not really for grown-ups. And it's not really for children. It's more for grown-ups. And it's not really funny. And they went, oh, Mum, you should write funny books and write them for children. And, there are 4 of them, 1 of me. So they outnumber me. So I thought I better do what they say. So that was my mission during medical school. I was going to become a doctor, but I was also somehow going to write a funny book for children. Now, once you decide you want to write funny books, it's actually really hard to decide what you're going to write about. And I wrote loads of books, actually. I wrote something like 4 books for children before I wrote The Double Detectives, Medical Mystery. And I think the reason those ones didn't really get published or get out there is because I hadn't really found the story that was perfect for me. And I was thinking, how am I going to get the perfect idea to write for children? And it came to me one day when I was working with my twins. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is a poster of a cartoon of my girls. And they were helping me with Teddy, who is my clinical skills Teddy. I used this Teddy when I was practicing clinical examinations. So I didn't have a dummy or a model or a skeleton at home. So I just imagined that Teddy was my patient. And so I would do all the maneuvers you need to do for chest examination or a examination or a heart examination or a musculoskeletal examination, all those things. I pretended Teddy was my patient and they would do the voices and so on for him and answer me. And I thought, actually, they know lots about medicine. They know all the secret little bits that might tell you something. So, for example, when you have a special ring around the eye, that might tell you how much cholesterol you've been having. So when they were telling me that, I thought, you know what? These girls have amazing medical knowledge. Wouldn't it be fun to write a story about children with fantastic medical knowledge who save the day because they're like detectives? They can pick up all the clues which might be medical related, so sort of like doctor detectives, to save the day, save the grown-ups and catch the bad guy, because they could actually work out, for example, if someone's tattoo was new or if someone was pretending to limp on the wrong leg. So I thought that would be, and also, if someone's collapsed, they'd know what to do about it. And I can read you a little bit about that later on if you like. So that was my big idea. I was going to write a story about super smart, brave children. And I've got twin girls in my book and twin boys who save the day with their medical know-how and save the grown-ups and actually do a brilliant amount of detective work and actually have lots of fun along the way. And it wasn't too much of a leap of the imagination, because I had 2 boys and 2 girls at home who were always bickering. So when I started writing this, I used to read them chapters every day, and they used to be amazing critics, because they'd laugh when they thought it was funny, and if something was going on a bit, they'd get bored. And so I knew exactly which bits to cut. Now, my children probably have a slightly low attention span. So when sometimes people read the book, they say, wow, that's really, really fast paced. And I said, it's because I read really fast and my children get bored really fast. So I just wrote something that really went at a fast pace. So these stories all take place in a few days. And there's lots and lots of activity. In this first one, there's actually even an alpaca attack, which was really, really fun. And in this second one, there's an amazing car chase with geriatric with a geriatric ex-performer singing Elvis songs the whole way. So there's lots, and the hospital chase as well, with lots of people in disguise and wigs, which is lots of fun as well, and fire escapes. So it gave me a chance to have lots of fun with the writing, to have lots of fun with my characters. And I guess it was just kind of, it was just right. So these are the 2 Double Detectives books. I'd like to tell you a little bit, maybe I'll just read a little bit from them, just to give you a little idea, and then I can tell you a bit about the characters, if you like. So the main characters in this book are Ali and Tulip. They're the twins on the cover, and they've got mum, who's a surgeon, a neurosurgeon, and she became one a little bit like me, a little bit later in life, because she was already a teacher. And then what happened is, very sadly, their dad had died from having something horrible happening in his brain. So mum had decided to become a neurosurgeon so she could try and sort that out, so she could solve things. So that's when she became a doctor. But that means, actually, with the girls, that sometimes they get left at home with their nan a lot. Nan's amazing, but she's not mum, but they were sometimes wishing that mum wouldn't work quite so hard, and so that's why they would sort of follow mum to the hospital. So I'm just going to read you a little bit where the girls have decided to run away to the hospital because they're cross with mum for being all sleepy and tired all the time. And so they're on a tube train going to the hospital. So first of all, Tulip's talking about her blog. The train was pulling into the stop for the hospital. I can't believe you read my blog, grinned Tulip. Let's work on it together. Great, said Ali. The long winter nights are going to fly by. She jumped up as the train door slid open. Let's go, she said, yanking up her bag. Mum had worked a late shift, which was why she was still at home that morning. Normally she'd leave an hour before them. They used to have the neighbours' teenagers hang out with them as childminders while they ate their cereal. They would teach them the best tricks on Minecraft, and they shared their Xboxes. Now they just had Sturgeon, Mum's new creepy boyfriend, who hardly went out to work. He said since he was already the world's best surgeon, he decided to refocus his interests. It involved a lot of mooching around their house. Sometimes he just stayed locked up in their old spare playroom with a lock on it, as though his stupid studies were so top secret. Tulip suspected he just napped there. As they stepped off the train, a woman behind them collapsed on the floor. Ali and Tulip looked around. Everyone else looked somewhere else, like they were trying hard not to notice the woman on the ground so they could get on with their day. Is there a doctor here? Yelled Ali into the crowd. Nothing. Is there a nurse, a paramedic? Yelled Tulip insistently. No one answered them. They were just little girls in school uniform. They were just little girls in school uniform, but they knew what to do. Ali and Tulip had seen Mum do this lots of times. When Nan couldn't babysit and Mum was on call in the night, they'd had to go to hospital with her. They knew their way around A&E blindfolded. They knew where the secret biscuit drawer was too. Tulip ran back towards the lady and knelt beside her. Clear a space, she yelled crossly to the suit swooping past, to the trainers pattering and the heels clicking. You'll trample her. Can you hear me? What's your name? Bellowed Ali in the lady's ear. She didn't reply. Sorry, said Ali, and she pinched the woman hard between her neck and her shoulders, and the poor floppy woman didn't even try to swat Ali away. No response to voice, said Ali. No response to pain. No, said Tulip. That's bad. She looked around wildly. The crowd had cleared a bit since the train had moved off. She spotted a station manager with a Transport for London badge. Hey you, she yelled. She needs an ambulance. The station manager nodded, sweating in the heat, and was already on his phone. And she and Ali counted together. 1, 2, 3. And on 3, they carefully turned the lady into the recovery position. Let's do the ABCs, said Tulip urgently. A, airway, said Ali. It's patent. There's no blockage, confirmed Tulip, shining her phone light into the sagging mouth. B, breathing. She is breathing, nodded Ali, watching the woman's chest rise and fall. C, circulation. Oh, I can feel a decent pulse, said Tulip, holding the lady's hand. Maybe there's a clue in her handbag. She rummaged delicately through it with her fingertips. Oh, honestly, said Ali, are you looking for a lace hanky, your ladyship? She grabbed the handbag, yanked it wide open, and dumped the contents so they spilled across the floor. She's diabetic, said Tulip, spotting the insulin kit among the usual handbag guff and fluff. D-E-F-G, don't ever forget glucose. And she grabbed a tube of sugar gel, squeezed it into the woman's mouth, and the woman's eyes started flickering. She was coming round. The paramedic came racing down the stairs. I think she had a hypo, said Ali. We've given her this. She held up the empty tube. Well done, girl, said the paramedic. Is this your mum? He asked. We'll look after her. The crowd who remained were giving Ali and Tulip a round of applause. No, said Tulip, tidying the things back in the lady's bag. Look, we're just heading off. Who are you with? Said the station manager. Are you on your own? They looked desperately around, and then they heard a familiar hum of wheels on a platform. No, said Nan firmly. They're not on their own. They're with me. Nan's smile flicked off like a switch when her eyes fell on the twins. She skewered them with a look of steel. So that's our introduction to Ali and Tulip saving a lady on the tube who's collapsed. Actually, when I wrote that scene, that had actually just happened to me that summer when I was at a big, lovely authors event in a lovely dress, and in the crowd with lots of people giving prizes, lots of lovely, well-known authors, and a lady behind me had just collapsed. And I looked around the room and realised I was the only medic there. So I had to drop to the floor in my nice dress, clear a space, and look after that lady and bring her round. And then I handed her over to the ambulance. And meanwhile, everyone around me just kept carrying on having the party, which was quite funny. But and the lady did very well. She was absolutely fine, actually, by the time I got her to the ambulance. So what happened to Ali and Tulip had actually happened to me. So that's why it was quite fun to write in a book. Sometimes it's quite fun to write about what you do know about, although you don't have to. Sometimes you can write about things that are in your imagination. I'm just going to read you another little bit from Diagnosis Danger, the second book, which just happened a couple of weeks after the last book. And in this one, they've just come out of school with their friends, their frenemies, Jay and Zach. And Ali is on the phone to someone and is getting very cross. No, this is not happening, screeched Ali. You are not doing this to me, mother. The others stopped, shocked. Mother, said Zach. No, said Tulip, this is bad. She used the M word. She only calls mum that when she's really, really cross. Don't you dare hang up on me, Ali shrieked. It was like waves of angry energy were coming off her. It was loud enough for wildlife to fly startled off into the sky and run whimpering away into the trees. One bit of wildlife raced towards her instead, as though she'd made a cry for help. A scruffy black lump of fluff screeched up the road and wrapped itself around Ali's legs. The cat. Not now, witchy, said Tulip, stooping to save the cat from Ali's limbs. Poor dumb cat really can't read the room. We're not in a room, said Jay. He gestured around the sunlit street, littered with weeds and after-school snack wrappers. Duh. You know, I'm remembering why we didn't like you before, said Tulip. There's still space if you want to get back on our enemies list. Tulip is normally nicer than this, but Ali's tantrum was getting to her. Oh, you said before, said Zach, picking up stray crisp packets, taking them to the bin. That means you like us now. No, shrieked Ali dramatically. She yanked out her earbuds and flung her phone away with a mic drop move. Zach stepped forward and caught it. They all stopped and stared at him, impressed by his reflexes. Oh, it's nothing, said Zach. Dad's super clumsy. I'm always catching cutlery off the table. He put the litter in the bin and gave Ali's phone to Tulip for safekeeping. I'm guessing she hung up, Tulip said to Ali. The phone started buzzing again. Hey, Mum. Yeah, it's me. No, it didn't even hit the ground. Zach caught it. There was a pause, a bit too long. Oh, right. Okay, Mum. Yeah, see you at home. Love you too. So what was that all about? Asked Zach, looking between Tulip and Ali. But beyond Ali's flair for the dramatic, said Jay, handing Ali back her backpack. But she was giving Tulip a death stare. Love you too, she repeated mockingly to Tulip. She shook her head in disgust. I'll tell you what it's about. That woman, that mother, she's cancelled the holidays. So that's the beginning of Diagnosis Danger, where the girls find out that their overworking mum has had to cancel the holidays. which is, quite upsetting if you're kids. And it's something I kind of really sympathize with, because last year at the beginning of the pandemic, all my holidays were cancelled, all the bank holidays, all the Easters, everyone in the hospital. We just had to work straight through because we couldn't afford to really take any time off. So all holidays were cancelled right through until August last year. So I kind of understand what it's like and why they get cross when we've got parents who have to do that. So I just thought I'm going to open up for questions in a little bit, which I'd love to hear. But I just thought I'd just tell you a little bit about the writing process. How do you know if you want to be a writer as well as a reader? How do you know what you're writing is any good? How do you start? How do you carry on? I guess for me, the important thing is to write what you really care about. If you really enjoy something and you're really enjoying writing it, then whatever you're doing, it's not a chore. And whether someone else really likes reading it, that's kind of up to them. But I think if you spend the time writing what you really enjoy writing, then that's a start. And I think another thing, just in terms of the technicalities of writing a book, for me, every story's about a character, or in this case, two characters. So you have someone who's going on a journey, and it might be an actual literal journey, like the girls getting the tube into the hospital, or going on a holiday. Or it might be a different kind of journey in their heads where something changes for them. And what you have to think during this journey is, what do they really want and what's stopping them from getting it? And I think with the twins, in the first book, what they really want is to work out why their mum's got this creepy, sleepy sickness, and how do they sort that out? Who's stopping them? And who's stopping them is her kind of difficult boyfriend who keeps getting in the way. And in this story, something else happens when mums cancel the holidays. Something to be targeting mum's friends, and they need to find out who's doing that. And also, they want to try and help out their mum a little bit too. So really, it's about, the stakes are really high in this book for the characters. So every time you write a story, try and think a little bit about that, thinking, whose story is it? Who's the main character? Is it me? Is it my friend? Is it someone like me? And then you think, what do they really want in the story? What do they really want to happen? And what's stopping them from getting it? And if you think about that, then you'll probably end up with a really good story. I think we're coming up towards time for questions. So I'm going to ask Sue if she could share some with me. And I also have a little brain teaser for some of you who might want to put in the chat box. Now, you may not know this, but children actually have more bones than adults. So I want someone to try and guess, how many bones does an adult human have? So pop it in the chat box and we'll see who gets closest.
Well, that's a foxing question, indeed. Yeah, so I don't even understand why. Why would you have a different number?
Yeah, what happens is children have more kind of separate bits of bones, the long bones, and they fuse together.
I see. Okay.
So children actually have more bones. Children are actually technically more bony than grown-ups.
Well, you live and learn. Thank you so much, Roopa. That was a really very interesting conversation, and just so interesting to hear about your sort of evolution as a writer and all the different books and things like that. So we've got some questions now. Really, I think you've probably answered one of these is, did you have any favourite books? Well, you mentioned The Lord of the Rings. Were there any others that stuck out in your mind as being kind of sort of seminal in becoming a writer?
I think probably in terms of the children's books, it was definitely The Lord of the Rings, because it had that big sweeping story and it was so fantastic and it had such fantasy. And I think also when you're growing up, if you're a little bit different, it allowed you to kind of look at people who are different. So my books actually have children who look a little bit like me when I was younger and a little bit like my girls. But there weren't many children like that in the books when I was growing up. So I tended to look for fantasy, for looking for people who are a little bit different. So I didn't see many books with little girls who might be brown or brown and white, but I did see books with hobbits and elves and dwarves and people who could basically show that all sorts of different people could come together. So in The Lord of the Rings, the company of 12 are humans and hobbits and elves and dwarves. And so it's kind of a magical coming together. And it's a bit like my friends. We're all very different. We're different ethnicities, but we're very different characters as well. And other books I really enjoy, because I was a bit of a geek and I really liked myth and magic. I really like reading the Greek myths. So I read things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, which were big kind of battle scenes with lots of travel and magic and so on. So I really loved those books.
Thank you. I think probably as almost a modern epic is Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, and in that he has a very strong female character of Lyra, and somebody has asked a question. Because obviously in your books you've got, Ali and Tulip are very good, strong characters, and also Nan and Mum as well. Do you have who is your favourite female character?
Lyra, always Lyra. So that's a great take. And you know what? The one criticism I have with Lord of the Rings, apart from the fact it's too short, is that where are the strong female characters? They basically have Galadriel, who is like one sort of goddess-like, very removed character, and Arwen, who's a fighter, and they have, the character Eowyn, who actually wins a fight in the end. But they have, even though they are incredibly important and are made sort of powerful women on a pedestal, they're not really part of the story. They don't take over the story. Whereas Northern Lights is Lyra's story. And I love that. And so I really love strong female characters in books. And, it's quite hard to find them. When I was younger, I used to find them in the Greek myths, funnily enough. So Medea, really kind of a terrible sort of villain character, but she was the main character in her story. So I used to seek out books where sometimes women were the main characters. Lots of books when I was younger, a lot of the Margaret Atwood books do that as well. So it was... I think in terms of children's fiction, I think Northern Lights is really, really strong for that.
Thank you. Kitty, who's 10, says that she loves murder mystery books. So yours come, well on the way to that. I've been reading Murder Most Unladylike about girls who are friends and detectives. Do your books focus on how friends can help each other solve murders? And do you think that two people, like in Sherlock Holmes, make the stories better?
Oh, interesting one. Funnily enough, when I write my adult books, so all these books here, I tend to have one main character, because when you're telling a story and you're trying to unfold someone's journey, it's easier to focus on one. But for children's books, I think what really knots us into our world, what really matters are our relationships. And sometimes they're kind of bickering relationships, sometimes they're loving relationships, but that's what really matters for us. So I think the reason that I wanted two girls in there is because I actually felt that, yes, two people are better than one. And funnily enough, I remember Philip Pullman saying, I teach at Oxford, and he comes and gives talks there sometimes to my students. We were talking about Lyra and how he first wrote Lyra appearing in the wardrobe in that room, when that's her first scene in Northern Lights. And do you know why he created Pan? He wanted her to have someone to talk to in the wardrobe, so she wasn't just saying her thoughts out to herself. So in the very first lines of that very first chapter, Philip Pullman created the whole idea of the demon, because in that wardrobe where she was hiding, Lyra needed someone to talk to. And so he created this idea of this other part of herself. So I guess in some ways our friends and our family are also other parts of ourselves, aren't they? So I think to have the girls, when I was first starting this story, thinking I'm going to write about, female, medics and young girls who are going to solve mysteries, I thought, why only have one female heroine when you can have two? And having twins in the house, it just made perfect sense to me. So I think with my story, I definitely wanted to have two people to kind of bounce off each other, to be quite different as well. Tulip thinks of herself as a sweet one, as a nice one, but sometimes she gets a bit trapped in that role, and sometimes she wants to have a tantrum and be able to do things like that too. Ali thinks of herself as a smart one, but sometimes she wants people to think that she's nice and not just a Wolverine who's always going to come up with a kind of a witty put down. And sometimes she wants a hug too, and she feels a bit too embarrassed to sort of show that, and she might hang back a little. So it shows that, we can, in our friends and in our family, we can actually, give the best bits to each other. And I think definitely in fiction, it's a really nice thing to do. And I love the Murder Most Unladylike series as well. I think Robin's books are amazing. I was so sad when it ended, but I'm really excited to know that there's going to be a new series with the younger sisters. So I think definitely two heads are better than one. And I don't think in the kind of Sherlock Holmes idea, there was sort of one sort of brilliant person and one person who was sort of a bit more of the straight man. And I think that it's quite, you can play with that however you want. You can have sort of one big main hero, or you can have like two who are quite equal. I think it's just really what you most enjoy writing, really.
Nancy's is reading your book at the moment, and she was wondering, how old are the twins in the book?
The twins are 10 years old in the book, and that was the age my girls were going to be when I started writing it. So they were 9 going on 10, and they've just turned 11. So the twins are 10 years old, and both sets of twins are. So they were in the same year at school as my girls. So I just felt very, very close to the story. So even all the art projects that they're talking about, doing the Nile and doing the Venetian masks and things like that, those were all things that my daughters were doing. And a lot of the kind of the schoolyard phrases and things are what people were saying, at least around in the school that my children go to. So I felt that everything felt, right for that age. I think, I'm not sure how it will be when, my daughters grow up and I feel a little bit less close to that 10-year-old kind of age range. But I think they'll be, they're only 11 now. So I think they'll be able to advise me for one more book to finish off the trilogy. Fingers crossed.
I guess you could always make your stories age as your children age as well. Who knows? Indeed. Lila, who's 11, Neve 8, and Sandy 7. Jo is their mum, and she says, "Oh my goodness, we've just sat down to read this and can't put it down. It's amazing, and the kids are hooked. We love the blog link too, because you put a little kind of extra bits in. We'll come back to that maybe in a moment." The kids' question is, did your mum ever cancel your holidays? And if so, why?
Oh, yes, so many times. I actually, this diary actually has a whole section of me complaining about the holidays that got cancelled. I thought, it's sort of, it happens for personal reasons. I had 2 other sisters. I had a dad who was away a lot. And so sometimes a holiday would be organized and then it would just fall through because my dad was working abroad, or one of my sisters got ill. I remember we were all meant to go skiing one time, and then I think something happened with me. So my sisters could go skiing, but I had to stay at home. I never actually went skiing until I was a grown-up, actually. And then I thought, what was the fuss about? Why was I so annoyed about not being able to go? It was just being very cold and going down a slope. But at the time, missing out, having a holiday cancelled felt like a really, really big deal. I know I guess, we're very lucky to be able to have holidays at all now, given, what's been happening in this, in the current pandemic. But I think my children felt a bit kind of upset last year when, we were due to go, not, just away for a little bit, just to see family or something. And then that all got cancelled. So yeah, sometimes, when you work hard and when you've got different commitments, sometimes something has to give. You try not to let it be the family, but, you do your best. So yes, unfortunately, my holidays did get cancelled when I was little, and perhaps I'm still a tiny bit bitter about it, if I can actually still find the section of the diary complaining about it and write it in my own books as well.
Rupert, one of the things that I really liked in your book was that the llama app that positioned people, and I just thought that was a really nice touch to kind of really bring it into the 21st century, the book. Was this a suggestion from your children, or you just decided I want to have something like that in?
Well, my daughters love llamas and alpacas, which is why I ended up putting a whole alpaca chase scene in the first book. And what I needed was to work out why. Did you notice in that first extract I read out that the girls were escaping? They were on a tube in London, and then suddenly their nan rolls up in her wheelchair like she knew where they were all along, and she keeps doing things like that. And I realized that sometime in the second book I had to work out how she has this secret information, because they were wondering, okay, has Nan bugged us? Has she injected us in our sleep with something? Has she got a tracker on us? Is she tracking our phones? Can they check the phones? So they checked the phones for tracker-aware, thinking, oh yeah, maybe she's following us that way, and they couldn't find anything. And I thought I had to think of a really clever way that someone like Nan Nan, who's like really techie and super smart from her kind of previous spy work, how she would do it. And I thought the best way to hide something is in plain sight. So if she'd try and hide something on the phones, the girls would have spotted it. But instead, it was right on the home screen as something fun. And they just assumed the other one had put it on there for them because they both like llamas. And so it was a kind of tricky bit of I don't know if this such a thing actually exists, to be honest. But, Nan Nan, her team has the girls in the lab. I kind of imagined they could set up something looked like a game, but actually when you followed them, you'd be able to work out exactly where they were. And then eventually it was going to be useful, because the reason that they needed to know on everyone's phones was because then they could track down their Nan Nan if they need to. I don't want to give too much away, but if someone in the story happens to get kidnapped or sacrifice themselves for some greater purpose, they need to be able to find out where they were. So if Nan Nan can track them, if they can work it out how she's doing that, then they can maybe track her. So that was where the idea came about. And I thought, what would children really not object to having on their phones? And I thought llamas, everyone loves llamas. So if you've had a fun llama app, would you delete it straight away? No, you'd probably play with it for a bit and just sort of ignore it if you got bored of it.
Oh, fantastic. I think it works really well. I really loved your books. And it was very good to hear that there's another one in the pipeline, because that was a question, are there any more? And so obviously now we know that we can look forward to it. So did you write Diagnosis Danger in the pandemic then?
I wrote most of it before the pandemic properly kicked off, and then I was editing it during the pandemic. So I delivered it, I think, maybe January or February, and then I was editing it during that time. So I've actually written something about that just in the acknowledgements that, it was really, here we go. I was editing this book during the pandemic, working into the night as an NHS frontline doctor. This is for my heroic NHS colleagues and frontline key workers who prove that real heroes don't wear capes. They're the ones who care, showing compassion and kindness in their daily work. So I kind of wrote this as well for my colleagues, and I hope it's a bit of fun for their children as well, and gives them something to read and kind of to be really proud of the work that that we're all trying to do. So so this one was written and just before the pandemic and edited, so I was doing all the rewrites during it. And my hope is that there'll be a third one to round off the trilogy. And I can also share some exciting news, is that there's going to be a kind of a little Christmas special in an anthology that's coming out in the winter as well from another publisher. So we're going to have a little Christmas special Ali and Tulip story coming out in the winter as well before the next book. So that'll be quite fun. There's going to be a lot of shenanigans in a snowed-in hospital with lots of people, with lots of mysterious Father Christmases in disguise. So it's going to be lots and lots of fun.
Oh, it sounds great. It sounds fantastic. I mean, I think as many people, we can't imagine how you possibly find time in the day to do all the many different things you're doing, but we're so glad that you do. And so now I think probably we need to let you get on with other bits in your, you have a very precious day off, and you maybe have other things to do. So thank you so much, Rupa, for being part of the I Write Story Festival. It's been such a privilege to meet you, and I'm sure many, many people will enjoy reading your books. So thank you very much.
Thanks for asking me. Can I just check, did anyone on the chat guess the right number of bones?
220, 172. Are we close?
Oh, very close. 206 is what we were going for, but that's brilliant. That's really close.
150, so there might have been more. Apologies to anybody who's written that. I just had to have a quick scan. Well, thank you. Well, now we know. Thank you very much, Rupa.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Teddy says bye. Off on my holiday.